Welcome to the RJI Futures Lab, where we help you make your organization more innovative. I'm Ruben Stern. This week, some creative ways to visualize the news. Visual journalists have been experimenting with new ways to use illustration and animation to tell stories online. Dan Archer is one of them. Archer has spent the past several months as a Reynolds Fellow here at RJI, exploring how comics and 3D technology together could offer a new kind of news experience.
Sometimes making stories visual is difficult because there's nothing to show.
You know, there are immediate cases that spring to mind of like recreations where you don't have picture reference, cases I specifically use where people don't want to be on camera, contrasting viewpoints in a particular story, historical recreations.
And in those cases, Dan Archer says a good answer could be comics.
The beauty of it is, I think, that a lot of comics present a very, I wouldn't say subjective, but they're very honest in the way that they approach things.
He also brings in virtual reality and game design, so users can explore the environment where a story happened.
I'm still using the same graphic journalism approaches, like incorporating drawn comics and sequential narratives, but I'm just adding them into an environment where the users have the freedom to explore different things in different orders, and trying to incorporate that with wearables as well, like Google Glass, so you'd walk into a scene, and if, for example, you were on the Camfield Green Apartments complex where Michael Brown was shot, and you looked, you would actually see a 3D sort of avatar of the figures as they were standing according to various accounts in that physical space.
Archer says all news outlets can and should do this kind of storytelling. For smaller organizations, that might mean hiring one part-time artist or programmer.
I think one mistake that people make is that they assume that there is only one size fits all. Everyone said, well, this should be tens of thousands of dollars. I mean, it's like saying, how much does an article cost? You know, you could write a 500-word piece, or you could do a year-long investigative piece. So I think we need to reframe the dialogue around what are the needs of different people, and it shouldn't be just like, we have a great story, let's add some color and a few drawings. It needs to be, if we're going to report this story, how can we do it in this way? How can we use comics and incorporate that into the beginning of the reporting process rather than see it as a novelty? What I would really like to see happen though is more experiments and sort of the breed of interactive graphic journalists being incorporated more specifically into the newsroom and not being just, like I say, bolt-ons. They need to be thought of as part of the process.
Archer says one day game designers could become the next rock stars of the newsroom. Carey Ching has been at the forefront of multimedia storytelling that uses illustration rather than photos or video. As she explains, the end result delivers complex material in the form of illustrated documentaries.
I was working on all of these projects that were just really complicated and really hard to tell visually, really difficult to tell in video format. Either, you know, the concepts were too abstract, or we couldn't get access to the sources that we needed to talk to, or it was something that happened in the past and we couldn't go back and film it. And I was really, you know, my focus was trying to figure out how to tell stories online, which to me is really difficult to do without visuals. That really started with In Jennifer's Room, which was a, you know, tragic story, an investigation that the reporter Ryan Gabrielson had been working on for about a year about abuse in these developmental centers in California.
And sure enough, they said something wasn't right. And they put her in a special school.
In 2002, when she was 27, she ended up at a state-run institution for the...
Very difficult story to tell with video, couldn't get access. You know, a lot of these people were going to be anonymous, so, you know, it seemed to be a natural fit for working with illustration or animation. We decided to go with stills.
At the heart of each project is a good story that can be told effectively with illustrations and animations.
You can't just sprinkle the animation dust on a story and that makes it a good story. Like, it actually still has to be a good story. It has to be a good piece of reporting. It has to be a story that's suited to the format, you know? So for me, that means either something that requires a sort of explanatory approach, or like a really good narrative that still has a really strong character. I go into the recording booth with the source and we record an interview that lasts anywhere from 1 to 3 hours, and I chop it down into a 10 to 12 minute monologue basically and cut myself out of it completely. And then I have the sort of base for my audio track, and then it's adding music and sound effects to really sort of craft it into this narrative. Then I do a really rough storyboard, so I'm taking a look at certain scenes, and there's certain images I think that we need to see at this place in the audio.
From there, Ching works with an artist who listens to the audio, looks at her storyboard, and begins sketching out images to accompany the audio. She followed this process on one of her recent projects, a series for Vice called Correspondent Confidential.
I'd been working with so many investigative reporters over the years who just had crazy stories to tell, and those stories never went into the actual reporting package, and it just seemed to me to be such a shame and such a waste of not only good storytelling, but also, I felt like the audience was really missing something if they didn't get to understand the full context of what was happening when people are out reporting. So I just felt like there was so much material there to make a really good storytelling series. And I originally actually wanted to do it as a podcast. It was going to be an audio series. And then, I started doing this illustrated animated work, and that was getting a lot of attention, and I realized there's a real opportunity here to tell these stories, but also tell them in this sort of new, artsy, illustrated way. I do still think the next frontier is figuring out how to tell stories in this sort of graphic storytelling, animated, illustrated way, but make it more interactive.
Ching says in the future she hopes to use the illustrated documentary format for an in-depth story about the meth epidemic in Hawaii. For the Futures Lab, this is Katie Mersman.
Along with this video, you'll find links to more examples of innovative visual stories. And that's it for this report from the RJI Futures Lab. I'm Ruben Stern. We'll see you in the future.